A couple in Phoenix just bought a 3-bedroom ranch for $500,000. The kitchen has builder-grade everything. The carpet is that beige color that screams, "We gave up." There's a crack in the driveway. The backyard is gravel because grass costs water and water costs money they don't have. Their combined income is $150,000 a year, which sounds great until you realize they're now spending 47% of their take-home pay on housing. They can't afford furniture for 2 of the rooms. They're financing a new water heater. And they just told their kids they can't do summer camp this year because there's nothing left. They're living the dream. They're also 1 car repair away from a credit card spiral. And the math that got them here? It's the same math that's pricing out 70% of American households right now. So let me ask you this. Who can actually afford a $500,000 house in 2026? And I mean truly afford it, not just qualify for the loan. Because those are catastrophically different calculations. I'm Tom. I run Lazy Investor. And for the next however many minutes, I'm going to walk you through the actual math on $500,000 homes, why it's absolutely brutal, and who's genuinely in the buying pool versus who's just being fed into the financial stress machine by banks that profit either way. Because here's what nobody in the real estate transaction will tell you. The incentives are designed to get you into the house, not to make sure you can sleep at night after you sign. By the way, I built a free early retirement calculator because most online ones are mathematically wrong. It uses BlackRock and Vanguard logic to expose the weak points in your plan, and I only ask for your email to send the report, so I don't store any of your financial data. Link in the description. Now, here's how I want you to think about this entire housing affordability question. Imagine you're at a poker table. Everyone can see their own cards, but nobody can see anyone else's. The dealer, that's the bank, keeps telling everyone they should go all in. The other players, those are your friends and neighbors. They're all betting big. Some of them are bluffing with nothing. Some of them have family money backstopping their bet. Some of them are genuinely holding good cards. But you can't tell the difference. All you see is everyone pushing chips to the center of the table, and the social pressure to match the bet is crushing. The table stakes to stay in the game? $500,000. And you're sitting there looking at your hand, doing mental math, wondering if you've got the cards to back up that bet, or if you're about to financially wreck yourself because everyone else looks confident. That's the housing market in 2026. Everyone's playing, nobody's showing their cards, and the house, literally the casino house, always wins because they're collecting interest either way. Let me start with what $500,000 actually buys you right now. In dozens of US markets, Denver, Austin, Nashville, anywhere within commuting distance of a major metro, $500,000 gets you 1,200 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a yard the size of a parking space, laminate countertops from 2003, fake wood paneling in the basement that somebody thought was classy during the Bush administration. The listing agent will call this a charming starter home with a straight face. The median household income in America sits around $84,000. So we're asking people making $84,000 to afford homes that cost 6 times their annual income. If that ratio sounds deranged, congratulations, you're paying attention. Because historically, the healthy ratio was closer to 3 times annual income. We've doubled the burden and rebranded it as normal. But everyone keeps saying you can do it. The mortgage broker says you're approved. Your parents bought a house on way less. Never mind that their house cost them $70,000 when they were making $25,000 a year. Some influencer on TikTok is flipping houses with no money down. Never mind that they're either lying or about to be bankrupt. So what gives? Here's what gives. Everyone is lying to you about what affordable actually means. And the lies start with a down payment because that's where most people's dreams detonate on the launch pad. The old rule was 20% down. On a $500,000 house, that's $100,000 cash. Let me say that again for the people in the back. $100,000. The median savings account in America has around $8,000 in it. You're not a little short. You're $92,000 short. And before you tell me you'll just save it, Let's do that math too. If you're making $84,000 a year and you somehow manage to save 10% of your gross income, which almost nobody actually does because life costs money, you're saving $8,400 per year. At that rate, it'll take you nearly 12 years to save the down payment. And that's assuming housing prices just freeze, which they absolutely will not. They'll keep climbing while you're trying to catch up, which means you're running on a treadmill that's tilted uphill. So you skip the 20% down payment, you put down 5 or 10% instead, which is what most people actually do. Congratulations, you just unlocked a new expense called PMI, Private Mortgage Insurance. This is a fee you pay every month for the crime of not being wealthy enough to put 20% down. It's a poverty tax that runs anywhere from $200 to $400 monthly, depending on your loan. And here's the beautiful part. You're paying extra money every month for insurance that protects the bank, not you, because they're worried you might default. So you're already starting from a position of financial punishment. The system is taxing you for being middle class. Now let's talk about the actual mortgage payment, and here's where the math starts to look like a horror movie. You put down 10%, that's $50,000 you somehow scrape together, maybe from family, maybe from liquidating your retirement accounts, which is a terrible idea, but people do it anyway. That leaves you with a $450,000 loan. At current interest rates, somewhere in the 6 to 7% range, depending on your credit, your monthly mortgage payment lands around $2,700 to $2,850. And that's just principal and interest. That number doesn't include a single other thing you need to actually live in the house. Let's add property taxes. Depending on where you live, you're looking at anywhere from $4,000 to $8,000 per year. Let's be conservative and call it $5,000 annually, which works out to roughly $417 per month. Then there's homeowners insurance, which has absolutely skyrocketed in the past few years, thanks to climate change making everything more expensive to insure. You're looking at another $250 to $350 per month, depending on whether your house is in a flood zone, fire zone, or tornado alley. Insurance companies have figured out that weather is getting more expensive, and they're passing that bill directly to you. Then there's maintenance, the thing everyone forgets about until the water heater explodes at 11 p.m. on a Sunday, and you're staring at a $3,000 replacement bill you don't have. The general rule, and I learned this from the accountants I've worked with for 10 years running my own business, is to budget 1% of your home's value per year for maintenance and repairs. On a $500,000 house, that's $5,000 annually, or about $417 per month. And this isn't optional money. This is the cost of preventing your asset from deteriorating into a liability. Roofs fail, HVAC systems die, plumbing corrodes, foundations shift. These aren't possibilities, they're certainties. And we can't forget the PMI we talked about earlier. Tack on another $200 to $400 depending on your down payment. So let's add this all up. Mortgage payment, $2,850. Property taxes, $417. Insurance, $300. Maintenance, $417. PMI, $300. Your total monthly housing cost is now sitting at roughly $4,300. And that's assuming nothing catastrophically breaks, you don't need a new roof, and your HOA doesn't randomly decide to repave the entire neighborhood and send you a special assessment bill for $3,000 because they feel like it. Here's where reality starts to feel like satire. Financial advisors will tell you that you shouldn't spend more than 28% of your gross monthly income on housing. That's the traditional benchmark for healthy housing costs. Banks will approve you if your total debt-to-income ratio is under 43%. They'll literally hand you a loan as long as your total debt payments, mortgage plus car plus student loans plus everything else, don't exceed 43% of your gross income. Let's reverse engineer this to see who actually qualifies. If you're spending $4,300 per month on housing, and that represents 28% of your income using the healthy benchmark, you need to be making roughly $185,000 per year. If we use the more lenient 43% rule that banks use, you still need to be pulling in around $120,000 annually just for the housing payment alone before adding any other debt. And now we arrive at the punchline that makes this entire situation darkly comedic. Only about 10 to 15% of US households make $150,000 or more, which means 85 to 90% of American households cannot comfortably afford a $500,000 house under any reasonable financial standard. This isn't an opinion. This isn't me being pessimistic. This is just math being cruel and everyone pretending it isn't. But you're thinking, people are still buying these houses. I see the sold signs. I see my neighbors moving in. Who are these people? Some of them have dual incomes in high-paying fields, both partners pulling six figures in tech or finance or medicine. Some of them have family money, the kind of quiet wealth transfer that nobody talks about at dinner parties. But that explains why your 32-year-old coworker just bought a house while you're still renting. Some of them are stretching themselves so catastrophically thin that one medical bill or job loss would collapse their entire financial life like a house of cards in a wind tunnel. And they're just praying nothing goes wrong for the next 30 years. Let me show you what this actually looks like when you zoom in on a real household trying to make this work. There's a couple I'll call the Johnsons, because I've seen this exact scenario play out multiple times with different names attached. Two working professionals pulling in a combined $160,000 a year. That puts them well above the median, solidly in what we call upper middle class. They should be comfortable, right? They should be winning. Let's watch what happens when they buy that $500,000 house and run the actual numbers. First, their gross income of $160,000 sounds impressive until the IRS shows up. After federal taxes, state taxes, FICA, and maybe a modest 401k contribution of 5% because they know they should be saving something for retirement, they're taking home around $9,500 per month. That's their actual money to live on after the government takes its cut. Now subtract that $4,300 monthly housing cost we calculated. They're left with $5,133 for literally everything else in their lives. Every other expense has to come out of that remaining $5,100. Two car payments, because American cities are designed around cars and public transit, is a joke outside of maybe 5 cities. There goes $800. Car insurance for 2 vehicles, another $250. Gas, because nothing is walkable in suburbia and they both have commutes, $300. Student loans, because they needed those degrees to get the jobs that qualified them for the mortgage in the first place. Conservatively, $600. Health insurance premiums that their employers don't fully cover, $400. Groceries for a family that's trying to eat reasonably healthy and not just ramen and hot dogs, $800 if they're careful, and shopping sales. Utilities for that bigger house, electricity, water, gas, internet, cell phones, another $450 minimum. We're now at $1,533 remaining. And we haven't touched clothing, entertainment, kids' activities, car repairs, medical copays, dental work, or the psychological need to occasionally leave the house and pretend you have a life. No vacation budget, no emergency fund being built, no meaningful retirement savings beyond that minimal 401k contribution, no college fund for the kids, no cushion whatsoever. This household is spending 45% of their take-home pay on housing alone. Not the recommended 28%, not even 35%, nearly half. And these aren't irresponsible people. They're not buying jet skis or taking European vacations or blowing money on crypto or designer clothes. They're just trying to live in a house that the market has decided is normal, and the market is completely detached from income reality. Here's what that actually feels like day to day. And I know this because I've talked to enough people living this exact scenario. It feels like checking your bank account before buying groceries. It feels like saying no to your kid's field trip because that $35 might be needed if the check engine light comes on. It feels like lying awake at 2 a.m., doing mental math about whether you can afford new tires this month or if you need to push it to next month and just pray it doesn't rain too hard. It feels like being one unexpected expense away from disaster at all times, every single day, for 30 years. The HVAC breaks in July? That's $5,000 you don't have. You're financing it at 19% interest on a credit card or taking out a personal loan. Someone rear ends you in the parking lot and your insurance deductible is $1,000. You're putting it on a credit card. Your kid needs braces. You're financing dental work like it's a car purchase. Your dog gets sick. You're making impossible calculations about whether you can afford to keep your pet alive. This is the reality for households earning $160,000 trying to own a $500,000 home. Now imagine what it looks like for the household making $120,000 or $100,000 or, God forbid, the actual median income of $84,000. At median income, buying a $500,000 house isn't tight. It's not stretching. It's not even aggressive. It's financial fantasy. It's mathematically impossible without either massive external help or accepting a level of risk that would make a skydiver nervous. But here's what makes this truly insidious, and this is where the psychology of money that I'm always talking about comes in. The housing market doesn't care about these numbers. Nobody in the transaction has an incentive to tell you the truth. Sellers list homes at $500,000 because that's what comparable homes sold for last month. Market comps dictate pricing, not affordability. Banks approve buyers at 43% debt to income because technically the loan won't default immediately, and they can securitize the mortgage and sell it off to someone else anyway, so the long-term risk isn't really theirs. Real estate agents encourage buyers to stretch as far as possible because their commission is a percentage of the sale price. They make more money when you buy more house. The entire incentive structure is designed to maximize transaction volume and price, not to ensure you can actually afford what you're buying. Nobody makes money when you say, "This doesn't work for me," and walk away. The bank doesn't make money. The real estate agent doesn't make money. The seller doesn't make money. The mortgage broker doesn't make money. The home inspector, the title company, the closing attorney, none of them make money when you exercise rational judgment and decline to participate. So everyone's incentive is to tell you that it's fine, that you can make it work, that everyone stretches a little, that this is just what homeownership costs now. And once you're in, once you've signed those papers and moved your furniture and your kids have started at the new school, you're trapped. You can't just decide 6 months later that this was a mistake and walk away without destroying your credit score for 7 years and losing your entire down payment. So people stay. They stay in homes they can't afford, working jobs they hate because they can't risk any income disruption, slowly watching their savings evaporate, their stress levels skyrocket, their relationships deteriorate under financial pressure, wondering why they feel so anxious when they're supposedly living the American dream. Let me tell you what the harsh truth sounds like when you strip away all the marketing and social pressure and cultural mythology. For probably 70 to 80% of American households, a $500,000 home is not affordable, not sustainably. Not without accepting a level of financial precariousness that would have been considered reckless a generation ago. This isn't about personal failure. This isn't about not working hard enough or not being financially savvy enough or not skipping enough lattes. This is about a housing market that has completely disconnected from income reality, and everyone pretending it hasn't because acknowledging it would require admitting the system is broken. Home prices have increased roughly 400% since 1990. Median household income has increased about 180% in the same period. The math doesn't work. It cannot work. It will not work. And yet we keep pretending it does. We keep telling people that homeownership is essential for building wealth, which is technically true in a vacuum, but ignores the part where you have to survive the mortgage first without destroying your financial life. I've been investing for over 10 years. I have multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars invested across various assets. I've run a business where I've been surrounded by accountants and fiscal lawyers who've shown me exactly how money moves and where wealth actually gets built. And I can tell you with complete confidence that owning a house you can't afford is not wealth building. It's wealth destroying dressed up in granite countertops and a 2-car garage. Because here's what actually builds wealth: margin. Having room in your budget to invest consistently, not having to choose between fixing your roof and contributing to your retirement account. Being able to weather unexpected expenses without spiraling into credit card debt, sleeping at night without anxiety about next month's payment, that's wealth. Not equity you can't access because you're trapped by the asset that's supposed to be making you wealthy. The financial industry has done an incredible job convincing people that home ownership is always the right move, that buying is always better than renting, that you should stretch as far as possible because homes always appreciate. But they're selling you a product. They profit when you buy, not when you make smart decisions. The bank makes money on your 30-year mortgage. The real estate agent makes money on the sale price. The insurance company makes money on your policy. The mortgage servicer makes money on the servicing fees. Nobody in that entire transaction makes money when you say, "No thanks, this doesn't work for me." So if you're sitting there right now feeling priced out, feeling like homeownership is slipping away, feeling like you're failing at some fundamental adult milestone because you can't figure out how to make $500,000 work on your income, I need you to understand something. You're not failing. The system is failing you. Home prices have outpaced wage growth so dramatically that what was normal and achievable for previous generations is now a luxury item for most people. A $500,000 house is not a starter home. It's not affordable on median income. It's not something you should stretch for unless you genuinely have the income to support it without financial gymnastics. Now you're asking yourself, okay, Tom, if 80% of people can't afford this, what's the actual threshold? Who can truly afford a $500,000 house? Here's the math. Using the conservative 28% housing cost rule, you need to be making at least $185,000 annually. Using the more aggressive but still reasonable 35% threshold, you need at least $148,000. And that's just for the housing payment. If you have any other debt, car payments, student loans, credit cards, you need to be making even more. Plus, you need to have saved $50,000 to $100,000 for the down payment and closing costs. And you need an emergency fund of at least 6 months of expenses on top of that. So realistically, to comfortably afford a $500,000 house in 2026, you're looking at household income of at least $150,000, liquid savings of $125,000, and minimal other debt. That's roughly the top 15% of American households. Everyone else is either priced out entirely or accepting a level of financial risk that previous generations would have considered insane. But we've normalized this insanity. We've rebranded financial desperation as adulting. Oh, you're house poor? Welcome to homeownership. Can't afford furniture for 3 of your rooms? That's just part of the journey. Eating ramen for dinner because all your money went to the mortgage? You're building equity. Champ. It's like we've collectively agreed to pretend that struggling to afford basic shelter is somehow a rite of passage rather than a symptom of a broken system. The math is screaming at you that something's wrong, but culture keeps whispering that you should buy anyway. So let me give you permission to do something that feels almost radical in 2026. You can choose not to play this game. You can look at a $500,000 house, run the real numbers, and decide that it's not worth sacrificing your financial stability, your mental health, your ability to invest and build actual liquid wealth. You can keep renting and invest the difference aggressively in index funds. You can save more conservatively and wait for a market correction, because markets always correct eventually. You can look at cheaper markets or smaller homes or different neighborhoods. You can acknowledge that the American dream of homeownership has been warped into something unrecognizable and possibly unattainable for the majority. And that's not your fault, because lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. And lazy investing requires having actual money to invest, not having every dollar tied up in an asset you can't afford. Here's what you actually need to do. First, calculate your real housing budget using 28% of your gross income, not what the bank approves you for. If you make $100,000, that's $2,300 per month maximum for total housing costs. Work backward from there to figure out what purchase price that supports. Second, build that down payment without liquidating retirement accounts or taking on debt. If that takes 5 years, it takes 5 years. Third, Make sure you have a 6-month emergency fund in addition to your down payment before you buy anything, because houses break and life happens. Those are the rules if you want to actually sleep at night. The housing market will keep pretending these prices make sense. Banks will keep approving loans that shouldn't exist. Real estate agents will keep saying it's a great time to buy. But you don't have to participate in collective financial insanity just because everyone else is. Sometimes the smartest move is recognizing when the game is rigged and choosing not to play until the odds improve.